Hi guys, I want to talk a little bit through a couple things and lecture. You know how much I love lecturing, but still I want to talk through a little bit, just to give you all some advice to think about as you're writing your third stories. First off, you got to remember that with reporting, what you are trying to do is not merely record details of something. You're trying to find the most interesting or the important thing going on so that you can find a great story. Remember, this always comes back to storytelling and telling a story that other people want to read. So, with that, one of the most common things I'm seeing with the stories I'm editing so far is really trying to come up with a good, solid lead and a good, solid conclusion. There's two common mistakes that young writers make writing leads, especially. And the first is making it all about you, talking about how you react, what you see as someone who is young or confident or whatever. And of course, it's cheerleading, as I said, but also it just doesn't matter what your reaction to something is. What matters is what happens, what you're seeing in front of you, and why it's important to your audience. This is not something that you guys are making a ton. I mean, you're not sort of writing these lavish, praiseworthy stories about how great something makes you feel, or somebody makes you feel, or how cool they are. But it's something to keep in mind that it's not all about you. Your job as a reporter is to find the most interesting or important story and to tell it. The second mistake, which many and probably even most of you all are making on your stories, is these essay leads where you come up with some very broad or general statement that sort of relates to what you're talking about, but it's so generic that the reader really doesn't have any idea of what you're talking about. Instead, what you need to do is tell a story. Let me show you a couple of examples. I'm going to start out with some examples from students and then look at some professionals. So this is here what I mean. I'll blow it up a little bit so it's a little easier to see. This is what I mean by a kind of essay lead. You're not setting a scene, you're not giving any color, you're writing something generic. This guy writes, "From the outside looking in, the life of a rock star is glamorous and almost utopian in the eyes of the public. Internally, in the life of the band is not uncommon for fundamental pieces, blah, blah, blah." So this is very generic. It's hard to defend. I mean, you really can't tell whether there's any proof of this. It's just the author kind of riffing. I don't want you guys riffing. I want you writing about what you see and what you see as precisely as possible. Especially for a lead, there's two things you need to have. First, you need to have a person in the lead. You need to have that person and you need to be able to describe them and hopefully describe them doing something, to have some action in a way that you have details that relate to the main focus of your story. So here's a very simple example. Again, this is a student lead from a previous story. Lily Branch is that little creek that is down in the middle of East Campus. And this is starting, there's not really a person in the beginning of this, but you'll see where she's going with it. Lily Branch, known more commonly to students and faculty as Stinky Creek, is an eyesore at best. Its dilapidated banks are covered with litter, and its water clarity resembles that of a standing puddle in the middle of a Georgia August. Katie Shepard wants to help turn this unsightly stream into a babbling brook. Now, this is wordy. We could talk about how to wordsmith it and make it a little bit more vivid, but still, you've got an image. You've got something in your eyes about what's going on here. You see this nasty little puddle, and you see a student who wants to change it. The story is basically about the student getting involved in stormwater runoff and landscape maintenance, and so it turns into a pretty good story. But let's look at some professional examples of these kinds of leads with people and details. So this is a story right now about Tiger with the Memorial teeing off today. And Michael Bamberger is one of the best writers at Sports Illustrated and working the country right now. So this is a lot more detailed than anything that you saw there with the student examples. But it's a scene-setting lead. It rained all day in Philadelphia. At Aronimink and the Philadelphia Country Club in Rolling Green, not a creature was stirring save for some men on tractors. At Marion, there was one lone golfer on the links in dark shorts, checking out the course that will host the U.S. Open, Tiger Woods his own self. So you have the image of it raining in spring rain in Philadelphia, and nobody's going to be out golfing in this, and blah, 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 but you know what? There's Tiger. So the story is basically a paean to Tiger's being willing to be disciplined and careful and to out-prepare everybody else. So, it's a good news story about Tiger, but you know what? You don't see anything about, Tiger Woods is the most disciplined man of his era here in the lead. You see a detail. You see something, a very specific scene, and someone who really needs no introduction in Tiger. And then it goes on to there about what he had done, but still you see this very vivid image here in the lead. This is a somewhat older not older, but it's a different Sports Illustrated story, and this is really a long-form narrative story, so it is very long. But I'm just going to sit here for a second and read over these first couple of paragraphs, because they're really good. Now here's this for a story. This is what I call an in medias res lead, into the middle of things. You see this guy who is, sounds like a country guy. He's leaving home in 2 days in Versailles, Kentucky, and he is getting ready to, try to walk on to the Wyoming football team. So at this point, this still could be a kid. I mean, yeah, I know kids, not too many kids are been in Copenhagen these days, but still, you think he could be, a young guy who is getting ready to go try to walk on to the Wyoming team, going from Versailles, Kentucky to Wyoming. But then you get this other detail. It's been 6 years since he came home from the war. He unties his tennis shoes, replaces them with a pair of black cleats, rolls his athletic socks up to just below his knees. Look at the richness of all of this, and then talking about he is a tall man in a Kevlar vest with sappy plates and grenades and M16 in the desert on the other side of the world. Look at all of these things and think about how the writer got that. He clearly tagged along with the guy to practice, and he wrote down every single thing that he saw. And he didn't know what starting from his bedroom and then all the way out to the football field. And then talking about Toyota Stadium and Georgetown College, metal walkways and plastic seats. You have to get all those details and then come back and think about how they all relate to the story you're trying to tell. You're trying to tell the story of a guy, a country boy, tobacco-chewing guy, older guy who's going to go try to play college football. And it goes on from there. And I'll post the links to these if you want to read them further. But what I want you to see is there are people in here. There are these rich descriptions of people. And that's what I want to see from you guys. Focus on a person. Tell a story in your lead. Describe the person you're talking about and focus on the details that relate to the main part of your story. Maybe tell his backstory, your golfer's backstory, or a particular person's backstory in the lead. Or maybe just provide these details of exactly what you see here right now. Going on to another couple of examples. This is a news story. This is actually more of a blog post. Is it better to walk or run? And this is a little bit of an essay, but look how much more specific it is. Walking and running are among the most popular physical activities, but whether one is preferable to the other in terms of improving health has long been debated. Now a variety of news students are providing some answers. Their conclusion, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So this is a news lead. This is from the New York Times Well blog, which is a great thing if you're interested in personal health and fitness and stuff like that. And it's a news lead, so it combines both the lead and the nut graph in that first paragraph. But she's not giving away the farm. She says she's able to say the conclusion, it depends. So you can tell that she's going to run through a list of things saying, okay, what is this goal and which is better? She starts out with weight loss and running wins going away, blah, blah. Participants asked, talks about the study, and then walkers, runners, but other measures of health shows that walking can be at least as valuable as running, even more so, in terms of diminishing cataracts. That's kind of interesting. And so walkers are better even than runners in things like high blood pressure and unhealthy cholesterol and blah, blah, blah. And it goes on from there. So again, it's okay to be, to essay a little bit, but you've got to really be specific. And that's why it's so much better to have people in your leads. Let's see if I've got one more. Yeah, I do. So this is a story about concussions. And it's something that Jeannie Laskus reported for 2 years before this came out. And this is a story that won a National Magazine Award. And look at this story. She had no idea back then that he was sick. She had no idea that he was losing his mind. Something neurological, some kind of sludge. Would it make a difference? Of course. Da, 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 da. So here the writer is actually in the head of this person who's the wife of an NFL player and trying to tell a story from her perspective about what her life is like. So this is another great item here, or another great approach here, is to try to tell a story from someone else's perspective. So let's look at the different kinds of leads here I'm recommending. You can have this very simple descriptive detail about where you're at or what the topic is. You can have something like this that's a scene setter that talks about a rainy day on a golf course. You can have this that's a very intimate description of someone and what he looks like and what he's wearing and what he's using and stuff like that. You can have a very specific news leads that goes through something. This doesn't really apply to many of your stories, but it's certainly a possibility here. And then you have this, which is telling the story from someone else's perspective. Look back at that macro editing form and look at those list of options that you can choose and think of one that's going to work best for the story that you're trying to tell. That's what I say, is try to write your nut graph, write the essence of what the story is about, and then think of that great killer detail or that person to have in your lead and to finish up with, and to have in your lead that is going to introduce the reader to someone who's dealing with the issue that you're writing about. Then the other thing again is your kicker. Again, I don't want essay kickers and people writing something generic to finish off with their stories about some grand proclamation. You know, got a lot of options. You can return to the story in your lead and how to link it back. Let's look back again at this Tiger Woods story. You can see, Tiger Woods in the rain all by himself or with just a couple of people on his course in Philly. Then here at the end, come Sunday, he'll be able to say to himself, no one else can say, I was here on a wet, lousy Tuesday. Who deserves to win this thing more than I? And Tuesday he was making headway in all 3 categories. So he comes to a conclusion, but again, there's a person. There's a focus on this person, not on something grand, not on something abstract, but saying that Woods is making some progress on owning the field, the course, and himself. And he was out here by himself. It's sort of the classic story of somebody outworking someone, but it works. On this story here, so Nathan Noble is practicing and blah, 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 but if we go all the way down to the end of the story, we come through, and this is a bigger statement, but it's still focused on the person. It's not focused on something abstract. Nathan Noble is recently told by someone who had no idea who he was that kicking a field goal in front of a big crowd in a college stadium is an experience of inconceivable pressure, and that trying to be a kicker on a football team would be the hardest thing he could ever possibly do. Now, this is an ironic statement because, of course, he was a soldier and saw people get killed, and everybody knows that's a hell of a lot harder than being a kicker on a football team. But still, that's just a hell of a story and a hell of a thing to leave you with right there. On this study, again, they lead off in saying that, the lead is it depends on what you're trying to do, whether you should walk or run. Down here, this is pretty weak, but for confirmation, and basically, although what she's trying to do is come down to say that bears repeating that either walking or running is healthier than not doing either one, whatever your health goals, and then consider one appetite or one example, saying people sat quietly for an hour and afterwards they were just sitting meditating basically, and afterwards they were really hungry. So it is actually a nice detail showing what coming back and providing more evidence to help you conclude what the writer wants you to conclude, which is that either walking or running is healthier than not doing either. So we'll leave it at that, but what I want you to do is in your third stories is make sure you have a person both in your lead and in your kicker. Work hard on that, get those rich details,